President Trump is now going after the husband of Kellyanne Conway, one of his longest-serving and top White House aides. Earlier today, he called the prominent conservative D.C. lawyer George Conway, quote, a total loser. Trump was responding to a post from his campaign manager that said, quote, we all know that Donald Trump turned down Mr. Kellyanne Conway for a job he desperately wanted. Now he hurts his wife because he is jealous of her success. POTUS doesn't even know him. George Conway is a frequent critic of Donald Trump, and as we mentioned here last night, he posted the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder after Trump's weekend tweet storm. Well, today, the Washington Post published a new interview with George Conway, pointing out, among other things, of course, the president knows him. He points to a number of notable interactions with Trump over the past decade. Conway also said that he was the one to turn down a job at DOJ. The Post also reports, quote, Conway suggested his own tweets questioning the president's mental health were aimed in part at avoiding conflicts with his wife. It's so maddening to watch, said Conway. The mendacity, the incompetence, it's just maddening to watch. The tweeting is just the way to get it out of the way so I can get it off my chest and move on with my life that day. That's basically it. Frankly, it's so I don't end up screaming at her, his wife, about it. Earlier today, former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, Frank Figliuzzi, who we heard from earlier, offered this analysis on Conway's posts about Trump's mental health.
If this were somebody else, what I would be thinking about would be what behavioralists talk about as the pathway to violence. There's a flashpoint that has warning signs and indicators before it occurs, and it involves obsessive behavior and brooding on one issue, the inability to step back and see reality for what it is. Where is this going? I'm concerned about where it's going, because on a workplace violence level, it would be headed toward violence. If you're president of the United States, that flashpoint could look like something that is completely unexpected on the world scene or on the national scene, and that's what should be troubling us about what Conway is warning us about.
With us for more tonight and returning to our broadcast from maternity leave and months on end without sleep, Ashley Parker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House reporter for The Washington Post, and Robert Costa, national political reporter, also with The Washington Post. He is also moderator of Washington Week on PBS, and during a good week, he doesn't sleep much either. Ashley, welcome back. It's great to see you, and I guess I'll start by saying, if this is couples performance art, it is of the hyper uncomfortable look away variety. What do you think is at work here? And I know you have a very, very memorable vignette from election night regarding this couple.
Yeah, that's true. So on election night, I was in the ballroom, the Midtown Ballroom, for President Trump's party, and I was standing there, and George Conway, once it became clear that Trump was going to win, he came barreling in, and tears were just streaming down his face. He was standing with a group of people next to me, and he was sort of weeping with joy and pride and saying, she did it, referring to his wife, Kellyanne Conway, and saying, you know, she managed this campaign, she got him elected, and he was just so deeply proud and truly happy for her in that moment. So it's sort of striking to see how things seem to, at least from a public point of view, descended in just those 2 years. And so when you ask, is this sort of performance art for the Trumpian era, it's a great question. It's something I've been asking. Is this sort of the James Carville, Mary Madeline shtick? And the people in the president's orbit I've talked to have said no. Again, if you're not in a marriage, you don't know exactly what's going on, but they have said that this is, their sense is this is real, and these are actually tension points, and it's not just something to, you know, give them a book deal or a TV deal after they leave the White House, or after she leaves the White House, rather.
Robert, here's how your colleagues at the Post reported one of these interactions between George Conway and Donald Trump. In a conversation with Trump at the wedding of Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin in June 2017, Conway said, Trump approached him and complimented him for not taking a job under then Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He said to me, I remember it clearly, you were smart not to work for that guy, Conway said. He is so weak. Trump then complained for several minutes that Sessions should have never recused himself from the Mueller investigation, Conway said. I told him, I'd heard the recusal issue was pretty clear, that Sessions had to recuse himself, Conway said. He took great affront at that. Robert, what's the lesson of that interaction, and what do you think is going on here?
Those scenes with President Trump are common when you talk to top Republicans in Washington. But this situation with Mr. Conway is a revealing microcosm into the Republican Civil War. So many Republicans recount these kind of scenes, often privately to reporters, about how they see the president operate in unorthodox ways in their interactions when the doors are closed. But they choose to continue to support him publicly because they've made a political bargain, in some ways a personal bargain, that despite his behavior, his conduct, some of which they criticize in severe ways, they feel he is responsible for bringing along conservatives on the Supreme Court. He provided a tax cut and tax overhaul law that Republicans are pleased with. And so they've accepted his behavior. But Republicans like Bill Kristol, the Never Trump movement, Mr. Conway, they do not accept it, and they publicly rail against it. Those are the fault lines. But those scenes, both sides say, they happen with frequency.
And Ashley, this public airing of a diagnosis from a physician's handbook, for a long time, it was Michael Moore, it was Bill Maher, and kind of that corner of the public realm using diagnoses like malignant narcissism. Now we have a respected D.C. attorney who happens to be married to one of the longest-serving aides to this president, just posting diagnosis, and this is all in the public realm now.
That's right, and that's what's so striking. If you look at George Conway's earlier criticisms of the president, they sort of started out in his area of expertise, legal criticisms from the point of view of a constitutional conservative, and then you saw him delving into mental health diagnoses, and that seems to be one of the things that possibly got under the president's skin. Our understanding is that the president has long been deeply frustrated with George Conway's tweets and his public pronouncements and his sort of gleeful willingness to take on his wife's boss. But the attacks from George Conway recently got more personal, and even though you still had aides urging the president not to attack him publicly, not to tweet back, it seems like sort of this personal level of attack and ratcheting it up is what prompted the president to ultimately respond in kind.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.